Hi, hello, welcome to the podcast of this week. We'll be talking about the Roaring 20s, beginning with the Harlem Renaissance, the changing roles of women, and consumerism. Starting off with the Harlem Renaissance. The Harlem Renaissance was the resurrection of black craftsmanship in the African American people group living in Harlem, New York during the 1920s. The Harlem Renaissance was the improvement of the Harlem neighborhood in New York City as a black social mecca in the mid-20th century and the ensuing social and creative blast that came about. Enduring generally from the 1910s to the mid-1930s, the period is viewed as a brilliant age in African American culture, showing in writing, music, show, and craftsmanship. With the changing roles of women, numerous women accepted that it was their privilege and obligation to take a genuine part in legislative issues. They perceived that political choices influenced their day-by-day lives. At the point when it was passed in 1920, the 19th Amendment gave women the option to cast a ballot. Shockingly, a few women didn't need the vote. A far and wide disposition was that women's jobs and men's jobs didn't cover. This thought of separate circles held that women should worry about home, youngsters, and religion, while men did what needed to be done in governmental issues. North Carolina rivals of women testimonials or casting a ballot asserted that women are not the equivalent of men intellectually, and having the option to cast a ballot would remove them from their appropriate circle of life. Though delayed to utilize their recently won democratic rights before the decade's over, women were addressed on nearby state and public political advocacy groups and were impacting the political plan of the government. More accentuation started to be put on friendly improvement, for example, defensive laws for kid work and jail change. Women's dynamic in governmental issues in 1929 still had little force, however, they had started the exertion to real political uniformity. Lastly, for consumerism in the 1920s was the possibility that Americans should keep on purchasing items and products in over-the-top numbers. These individuals neither required or could manage the cost of these items, which by and large made them live check to paycheck. Individuals purchased numerous amounts of items like autos, clothes, washers, sewing machines, and radios. This huge buying period prompted portion plans. These were plans for individuals in which they had the option to buy their items and pay for them sometime in the not-too-distant future in little regularly scheduled installments. This was the motivation behind why 80% of Americans during the 1920s had no investment funds by any means. They were living check to paycheck. This consumerism later turned into a contributing component to the beginning of the Great Depression, since it incredibly expanded the measure of consumer debt in America. That's all for today. Thank you for listening, and tune in next time for the next podcast.